Thank you, Mr. President. I move, subject to announcements, that the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow, and request the yeas and nays on that vote and have announcements.
Are there announcements? The Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. My general understanding is that the bills have been delivered to Legislative Services by His Excellency the Governor, but they haven't been formatted properly, so we expect to have them for formal introduction tomorrow morning, and that's my only announcement.
Further announcements? The Senator from Marion.
Gentleman from Morgan yield.
Senator yield. Senator does yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we expect to see the bills on the system sometime this evening or tomorrow morning?
The clerk's office informs that as soon as they're available, they'll be put on the system. They're not at this time, apparently, because the formatting is in which the bills are delivered is inconsistent with what Legislative Services is used to, so they're, I guess, reformatting the bills. But I guess they'll go up to if it occurs today, they'll go up today. That would be our hope.
So we can maybe expect them sometime this evening?
Clerk's saying I can make that promise.
All right. Thank you.
Further announcements? Not. The question before the Senate is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.? The yeas and nays have been requested. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 30 yeas, 1 nay, 3 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the motion adopted. I declare the Senate adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
In a couple weeks, I know you miss me. Could you tell me what that blue light special is in front of you?
Yes, we're currently running at 46 days, 7 hours, 57 minutes and 14 seconds and counting.
To what?
Till July 1st.
And what happens July 1st?
My understanding is that's the the start of the new fiscal year.
Okay. And the start of the fiscal year, why are you counting down to that particular point in time?
I share the gentleman's concern that we're late in the year, and at this point we have no way of funding state government beyond that date.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is that we're going to shut down if we don't have a budget.
That's my understanding.
Are you prepared today to vote for or against a budget?
Which particular budget were the gentleman referring to?
The budget that the governor has presented.
As yet, I've not seen a budget.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, my commentary this afternoon will be minimal. However, my good friend from the 30th, and I get to come in and see that blue light, and I appreciate it because I sell LED signs, and so it's a good promotion for what I do for a living. But the fact remains for this legislature that we met in regular session for 60 days to contemplate the business of the state. We met to contemplate taxes. We met to contemplate road funding. We met to contemplate all of those items, and we did our business within that 60-day period. Included within that, we authorized the governor to put before the electorate a bond issue to vote on. So we've done that kind of work. Since we have been here today, the only thing that we have dealt with is a funding mechanism for that bond that, frankly, as a legislature, we have decided to put off until after we see whether the electorate wishes, the voters want to pass that bond issue or not. But our specific purpose today, and the concern of all of us here today, and the concern of people across the state of West Virginia, is funding our state government with a budget. A budget. And at this particular point in time, we haven't seen a budget. Now, there's a popular radio show here around the state, and you all have heard it many times. He's talked about fixing the road. Hashtag FTDR, fix the darn roads. I would suggest to Mr. Kercheval and all of those members here that maybe we need to mention to the governor that we should hashtag WTDB. Where's the darn budget? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 57th, Elliott Rowan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been brought to my attention that the gentleman to my right is looking much older today, and I guess he's got a birthday, so if I could call on the lady from the 16th to officially mark the occasion.
Lady from 16th.
Thank you. Will you please all join me in singing happy birthday? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tom. Happy birthday to you.
The gentleman from the 23rd, Doug Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a little bit more somber note, members of the House, as you may know, today in Washington, D.C., thousands of law enforcement officers from across the United States have assembled to pay their respects to those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for their nation, their state, and for their communities. Today is National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day. Each and every day, there are brave men and women who tell their families bye and go to work for the simple task of making our communities a better and safer place to live and work. Unfortunately, some of these guardians of peace never make it home, leaving spouses, children, and other family members behind in the wake of violence. They took an oath to do what many would never think of doing, taking a vow to protect their fellow man at whatever cost, even that of their own life. Many in West Virginia have made these sacrifices and even paid that ultimate sacrifice. During 2017, the United States has seen approximately a 39% increase in the number of law enforcement fatalities when compared to the same time frame in 2016. Today at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, the names of more than 21,183 are engraved on the memorial walls. In the last 10 years, there was an average of 1 death every 63 hours, or 151 per year. In 2016, there were 143 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. In 2015, there were recorded 51,548 assaults against law enforcement officers, resulting in 14,453 injuries, some of which career-ending. In case you've never noticed, there are 210 names placed on the West Virginia Law Enforcement Memorial on the corner of the concourse of the Cultural Center near Greenbrier Street, where the Fallen Partner Memorial stands. Last week, a memorial observance was held by West Virginia law enforcement at our own memorial. This week-long observance has been held annually since President John F. Kennedy proclaimed the first National Peace Officers Memorial Day in 1962 as we honor the fallen. I, like many others, hope and pray that we never see the blood spilled on another badge in our state or nation. We certainly owe these brave men and women our humblest thanks and support for what they do to try and protect us from those who seek to cause us harm. They certainly don't do it for the money, but rather for a sense of pride in their communities and for the benefit of their fellow man. Please remember that as we continue to deliberate on the budget. This is serious to our constituents. Mr. Speaker, I join the gentleman from the 9th in recognition of National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day. We would ask a unanimous consent for a moment of silence to show our respect for those officers who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, as well as to honor those who continue to serve our great state.
If all members and guests would please remain standing for a moment of silence. Members may be seated. Gentleman from the 22nd, Doug Eldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have a similar request from the gentlelady from the 16th. I have a good friend over here from the 32nd. His birthday is today, and my father's birthday is today as well, and they're close of being the same age. So if you could lead us in a happy birthday to my good friend, delegate from Fayette County.
Lady from 16.
I wish you could sing with me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shirley. Happy birthday to you.
Gentleman from 36, Doggett Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just think that maybe a little perspective would help us a bit on the budget and the governor's position as we've gone through this extraordinary session. The governor had a budget, and it was worked in House Finance, and it wasn't approved. We changed it and did, I think, a strike and insert, sent it over to the Senate. It was passed late, and the governor vetoed it. So there are several budgets that we've dealt with. The issue really before us is revenue measures of what tax increases are we going to vote for in order to support a budget. Doesn't make much sense to have a budget if there's no revenue to support it. Now, what happened in the House last week very clearly was the Senate, by I think only one vote opposing, the Senate passed over to this House what I think was a very reasonable revenue proposal. It had a number of provisions. It took care of what was needed. It kept us from having draconian cuts to the budget. And this House, instead of voting to send the bill to the committee, the Finance Committee, we killed it dead. Well, that was on Thursday. And then on Friday, the Senate reworked the bill, sent it back over, and did we send it to Finance? No. There was a motion, and we lost that motion to send it to Finance. So there seems to be an assumption in this House that it's inappropriate for us to use the committee structure for some of these revenue bills. Now, I'm happy to report that Finance today did meet on the gas tax bill and revenue measures to improve the state road fund. So we did use it in regard to that, but the basic bills we've been rejecting. I'd like to see us start working a bill. I don't think it's appropriate for us to assume that the governor and the leadership in the Senate and maybe just the leadership here are going to be the ones that develop a bill as to what we can, we have to protect all of our constituents, and we all should be participating in the process. So I think some perspective is appropriate, and the question has to be of whether this House has stepped up and started working a revenue proposal. And I think the answer to that is no so far. And you say, well, but the budget, the governor hasn't introduced a budget yet. Why would he introduce a budget if there's no money to support it? So I think that we need to be looking at ourselves and the way we process. I believe in the committee structure. I see it work on bill after bill after bill. I don't know why we can't work revenue measures through the Finance Committee and bring them to the floor and discuss them fully. So I would suggest that we look at our process and that we use an open process in order to review whatever revenue measures there will be, and then ultimately the budget. We use the Finance Committee produced the budget that was proposed on the floor of the House and was voted over to the Senate before the session ended. So I think that if we can just sort of all come together, use our committee structure, and look at the bills that are proposed, I think that we'll be able to work through this budget impasse well before the countdown time that the delegate from Raleigh has counting for us on his desk. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 58th, Doug Coles.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I rise just to clarify a couple things from my colleagues' comments. We don't have a bill introduced. We're waiting for a bill to be introduced to come up from downstairs for those revenue measures for your consideration. For whatever reason, that just has not happened yet today. We're waiting for, if it came to the Senate or came upstairs to the Senate and were to come over, that would be fine. We're waiting for that to happen. That hasn't happened yet today either. So those things have not yet been seen here today for us to even put in committee. And of course, as my colleague said, there's the hashtag WTDB. We don't have a budget. We don't have a budget bill that's been introduced in this special session. If this special session is about the budget crisis before us, if this special session is about the deadline that's looming before us, we don't have a budget bill before us. We don't even have a budget bill on the call before us. We don't have the revenue measure that my friend is talking about that's been introduced for us to have the clerk read and send to committee yet. Time is of the essence. There is an urgency about it. We need to get the budget done. We need to have the budget bill on the call and introduced before us. And any revenue measures that need to be considered, they also need to be introduced and sent up here so we can get to work. So those are the things I wanted to share. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John from the 10th, Delegate Dean.
Yes, would the delegate from Kanawha yield?
Gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Delegate, I don't mean to embarrass you,
yes,
but I recall on previous votes where we have had a tax increase like in 45 cents on cigarettes to balance the budget, and I believe you voted against that. I'd like for you to tell me what taxes you have or would vote for to balance any budget that we might receive from the governor downstairs.
Well, I voted for the 65 cents on the tobacco tax, and I favored a $1 increase last year.
Vote. It failed, you know.
Last year. This year, as I said on the floor of the House, I support the governor's plan with the revenue increases that he was supporting during the session. So I don't have any trouble with us meeting our obligations to raise revenues so that we can meet a budget that we have. And I think that we saw several things. I thought that either of the two Senate proposals, the second one was voted on but with only one dissenting vote, was ignored by this House. We rejected it before it could even be considered, before it could even be argued. You know, we couldn't reach the merits of that bill because that wasn't the issue. The issue is whether we're going to reject the bill or not on first reading. So I think that the procedure we need to adopt is one that's open, that involves committee work, and that we start on the revenue provisions. I'm really not sure that we should do a budget until we know how much money there's going to be. But when we do get a budget, we can all review it. But there have been plenty of budgets floated here in this building during the regular session, for certain.
Well, Delegate, it seems to me like we're so polarized here in this body. Everything we vote for as Republicans, the Democrats all vote against it. Do you think that maybe we should get together and some Democrats and some Republicans vote for something they don't want but have to accept to get a balanced budget? Do you not think we should do that?
I completely agree. And please remember that the Senate had only one opposing vote in the last measure that they sent over to us. They're working together. They're being a model of legislative action. We, on the other hand, rejected the bill that they sent, both bills that they sent over here, on a straight party line vote. Straight party line vote. So I don't know that we could say that there's a failure for either party, but certainly we do need to get together and we need to start discussing the merits of the bills.
Well, Senator Delegate, I'm glad that we agree on one thing, that we both need to compromise and get together and get something done. I'm willing to vote for tax increases. I don't want to, but as I said earlier in our caucus, I'm for our leadership. Are you with your leadership? If your leadership votes for a tax increase, will you follow their lead? I will.
Yes.
Will you?
Well, I think our leadership has shown that they're supportive of the governor's plan. I'm supportive of the governor's plan, and I think that there's a sense on our side of the aisle, certainly, that we need to get moving and get the discussion started. And I think that our leadership is more than willing to do that with your leadership.
Okay, so when you say our side of the aisle, does that mean you?
Well, I think I would hope it would also mean other members of my party have evidenced an intent to try to participate, and they were supportive. You know, I think it was 100% supportive of the Senate's plan, which was a Republican-Democrat bipartisan measure. And I think that's the important thing, is that we're not looking at the way the Senate has approached these problems, and that we should and we shouldn't have rejected the bills, and that we ought to look at those. And I think it will help us, all of us, if we open up the process.
Well, Delegate, let's shake hands. Together, we'll vote for a bipartisan effort to get this budget passed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Completely agree, sir.
I'll keep watching your button.
Okay. That's fair.
Gentleman from the 48, Doug O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to address what the gentleman from Wood said. We're not quite polarized along political lines, just because if we were, then 64 members can pass whatever they wanted to pass. So there's some fractures within both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as well. So I would suggest that we not assume it's just polarized along political lines, but more along ideological lines. And I think common sense and reason needs to be brought to the forefront of any budget we pass, including any revenue measures. And just to further clarify a little bit of what the majority leader said, I got up and spoke on the motion to have the revenue bill sent to Finance. In fact, you spoke against it. My comment was, let's send it to Finance, even recognizing we were going to be recessing, but it would be waiting there for us when we returned. And that would give plenty of time to come up with a committee substitute or an alternative plan. But your comment was, no, we don't need to do that. We can originate a bill if we wanted to. And those are almost your exact words. And to date, we have neither a committee substitute that we've seen or an originating bill, despite the passage of 10 days or so. So I think we just ought to be careful about casting aspersions on who's at fault for why we're here. We are where we are today for various reasons, and we can either choose to work together and try to pass the revenue measures, which we all know we need. We can quit trying to convince ourselves that we don't. And we can also then come back and pass a budget bill based upon the revenue measures. So I think we don't serve anyone, and especially our constituents, well by standing up and blaming others for whose fault we are, is why we're here. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
John for the 55th, Doug Espinola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the remarks from my good friend from the 23rd be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, remarks be printed in the appendix of the journal. Thank you. Further remarks by members? Miscellaneous business. Gentleman for the 58th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until, or subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Are there announcements? Gentleman from 64th, Delegate Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on Finance will meet tomorrow morning, May 16, at 9:15 a.m. The agenda will be posted.
Further announcements? Not question for the House is a motion by the gentleman for the 58th that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. As appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the House adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.